I have a serious problem. I'm in love. I met Sadako my first year of grad school. She was so beautiful and more perfect than anything I could have ever imagined. Her smile was the thing dreams are made of, and her voice made me feel like I was hearing sound for the first time. I loved her so much. I still love her. I just don't love the things she does. Every day is the same. I come home from a job I hate and wait for her to find me on the couch. Then it begins. The first time it happened was about a year into our relationship. We were talking about moving in together. I wanted to wait until my lease on my apartment was up so my roommate, my best friend for years, Alice, could have time to find a new roommate. She didn't agree. You can't keep taking care of her, she told me. What about us and what we want? I still remember the way those long, thin fingers crawled on my arm as she spoke. Do you love me? Of course, I said, smiling, and naive. Do you trust me? Her voice became husky in just the right way. I nodded, unable to do much else. I felt my heart speed up, and I knew in that moment I would bow to her each and every desire. Would you feel the same way if some things changed? Of course I would. She was perfect, and I was lucky enough to have her. How could I say no? Let me show you something. She grabbed my hand and led me to the basement of her home. The smell hit me first as the door to the dark stairway swung open. Spoiled meat, mildew, and dust. I wanted to vomit and turn away. I should have demanded she tell me what the hell was down there before I stepped foot on those stairs. But she gave me that damn smile of hers, and I was doomed. I followed her down there. I caught glimpses of something thin and shiny covering the walls around the stairs. It was too dark to see much else at first. We reached the bottom of the stairs, and her hand slowly slipped out of mine, her fingers curling around my own right before she separated completely. Sadako vanished into the dark of the basement, and I waited. A single click, and the light flashed on. Oh God, how I wish it hadn't. There were webs everywhere, covering the walls, the floor, and forming suspicious-sized mountains stuck everywhere, including even the ceiling. I wasn't stupid. The smell and their shape was all I needed to piece it together. There were dead bodies cocooned in the mounds. My girlfriend's basement was a webbed mausoleum. I screamed. I screamed in horror and grief equally. I lost my perfect Sadako in that moment, and was left with a monster standing in her place in the center of the room. I tried to turn and run, but something pulled me back and pinned me against the ground. Large black spider legs with a thin layer of fuzz held my body down. Sadako stared down at me, propelled into the air by 4 of these limbs protruding from her back. 3 pairs of eyes that had once been a single beautiful pair of dark, almond-shaped ones looked into mine. Somehow, they were still beautiful, and for a moment, I forgot the horror I was facing and stared back in awe. You said you'd still love me. she said, her many eyes furrowed, seeming sad and almost pitiful. You promised. She lowered her body slow and steady from the air until she pressed it against mine. I'll admit the warmth I felt, just like all the other times before when I had been lucky enough to feel her next to me. I returned to a more sensible feeling of terror, as small points tore through her gums, and two thin fangs slipped out bit by bit, dripping something gray that smelled like rat poison. I called out to her, shouting and thrashing around as those fangs pierced the junction between my shoulder and neck. Then pure and utter pain entered my bloodstream. I felt fire swirling and lashing out under my skin until I couldn't take the pain anymore, and my vision began fading out. The last image in my mind was Sadako's smiling face above me. I later learned I was out for 2 days before I woke up in my girlfriend's bed drenched in sweat. Sadako laid curled around me, her monstrous form nowhere in sight, and pressed a cold rag on my forehead. Her rose-petal lips pressed against my cheek, soft and loving. You lived, she cooed into my ear. I knew you were special. She pressed the rag more firm on my forehead and moved sweat-slicked hair away from my face. Don't worry, baby. I'll take care of you. I knew she meant it. 2 more days later, I went back to my apartment and moved everything I owned to Sadako's house. Alice was so pissed. She yelled, begged, and did everything she could to try and change my mind. I understood why she was being difficult. I vanished for 4 days and only came back to get my stuff and leave her with paying double the amount in rent she had before. She didn't speak with me for a month. But Sadako said it was for the best at the time. I know how this sounds so far. It's easy for you to say you would have left if you were me. You didn't see how perfect Sadako was before that day. You never met Sadako, who held my hand at the top of the Ferris wheel, or the Sadako that held me as if I were her most prized possession and told me I was the most important person in her entire life. Then there was the venom, of course. It hurt the first time. Hell, it hurts every time. But the insertion of those fangs brings more and more euphoria beneath the pain. Better than sex or any drugs you can think of. Unfortunately, I'm hooked, and she's the only dealer I have. A month after I started living with her, Sadako suggested I invite Alice over. I know you miss her, baby, she said while holding me the night before. I was lonely, and I missed Alice so much. For weeks, Sadako was my only company, so I called her without any second thought. I told her how sorry I was and begged her to come over. Maybe I sounded pathetic enough that she thought she had to rush over. She didn't ask any questions and made it over in 20 minutes. The face she made when I opened the door stuck with me. Alice's eyes went as wide as saucers, and her hand instantly came up to cover her mouth as she gasped. Holy shit, she said, looking me over. What happened? I know how bad it was. I'd seen the bags under my eyes, and the sunken features of my face. I'd given up on brushing my hair for a week by then, and resorted to using baggy clothes to hide the weight I'd been losing. It's a long story, I sighed. That wasn't what I wanted to say. I wanted to cry, tell her how Sadako had changed, and beg her to save me. None of that happened. I heard rumors you stopped coming to class, Alice said, her eyes watering. Your mom's been calling me nonstop. What the hell is going on? You're really scaring everyone. I felt the tears coming. Alice's arms wrapped around me. It felt amazing. I had to be selfish and enjoy the contact. I embraced her back and let myself cry. Why are you touching my girlfriend? Sadako seemed to appear from nowhere in the hallway. I had known she was changing back there, but I hadn't thought she'd be done so soon. She stared straight at us from across the living room, and I wanted to flee and fall to my knees and ask for forgiveness all at once. Alice let go of me and marched toward Sadako. All of the joy from earlier fled. This is your fault, isn't it? Excuse me? Sadako's voice, but I knew the danger in her voice. You heard me, bitch, Alice snapped. I don't know what's going on, but it ends here. She started walking back toward me and turned her back to Sadako. She never saw the extra limbs appearing out of Sadako's back, or the extra eyes opening on her face. I screamed and begged her, but Sadako was never good about listening once her mind was made up. It was a blur of those awful limbs shooting forward and grabbing Alice, while the other two scurried to carry them to the basement. Alice screamed, and I ran after them to the basement. Another regret on the list. My mind is permanently scarred with the image of Sadako's fangs sinking into Alice's neck, and those spidery limbs tearing and ripping into her flesh. Because of that night, I know the sound of tendons and muscle being torn from the bone, and Alice's screams of untold agony. When Sadako began eating, I ran to our room. I cried and screamed until Sadako found me there. She pressed herself close to me, covered in Alice's blood. She smelled of poison and pennies, and didn't hesitate to wrap her arms around me. She nuzzled her cheek against mine and whispered in my ear with so much love it hurt. I'm sorry. She pressed her lips to my ear, and I felt Alice's blood on them. I didn't want to, but you heard her, trying to get between us. Don't you see, baby? Nothing matters more than you. That's how much I love you. She held me tighter and comforted me through my tears. She kept apologizing and saying how much she loved me until... I love you too, I finally admitted. It wasn't a lie. How could I not? She was going to be all I had. I know, baby, she said, sounding much happier than I did. as her fangs lower themselves and pierced the skin in my neck. They sunk in deep, bringing that hellish, heavenly burn that I craved and hated. That was 3 years ago. There's been many mounds added to Sadako's basement collection since then. None of them are people I care about, though. I made sure of that, pulling away from family, friends, and acquaintances until they were too exhausted to even try anymore. Really, do I deserve any of them anyways? I don't bother feeling anything for the strangers she kills. Nothing could hurt or shock me the way Alice did anymore. I've grown somewhat attached to Sadako's friends. I know they're safe to get attached to without worrying she's going to hurt them. I work at part-time at a library since I stopped going to school. It's a way to get out of the house for a handful of hours a week, even if the place is a shithole. Then there's her. I know Sadako loves me. I see it in the way she holds me, and I hear it in her voice. But she's not human. She doesn't understand that what she's doing is wrong. It's the only way I can justify how she can do any of this. I know she loves me, even when I feel venom in my blood. No matter how bad things get, I know she never really hurt me. Because she loves me. And despite everything she's done, I can't help but love her back. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you want to see more, let me know in the comments below, and tell me what you thought of this narration. Make sure to follow me on Twitter for updates, and if you'd like to get early videos, shoutouts, and much more, I'd appreciate it if you check out my Patreon page. It's a place where you can help support my channel while getting awesome rewards in the process, and every pledge helps out a ton, no matter the size. So if you'd like to see all the rewards I offer and consider becoming a patron, it'd mean a ton to me if you'd click the link in the description and just check it out. And don't forget to show some love to the amazingly talented authors who make these narrations possible. Have a good night, everybody. Cheers.